Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today we are going to be doing this. I don't know if you saw the video I did when the new release came out. We're going to be doing the third card. So I'm using the Holiday Blooms just for the sentiment, the stamps and dies. Our main focal point here is going to be the pine centerpiece. That's what this is. I used it clean and simple. This one is not going to be clean and simple. We're going to be talking a lot about different ways to add snow. Because as much as it pains me, we are heading into that season where people are going to be getting snow and tackling Christmas cards and things like that. So I thought that it would be a good time to kind of touch on a couple of different ways that you could add it. So here I'm just stamping out all of my elements because I did make 3 cards at one time. You'll see on here some of the elements I'm stamping out you don't see in this card. If you missed that previous video, I will link it at the end. Also in that video, I asked several of you if you wanted to see how to color the candy cane amaryllis. There was a lot of people who said yes, so I will have that video coming up as well. This I am stamping in what is it? It's the B Creative Intense Black. Sorry, I couldn't think of the name of it. And that is safe for alcohol markers. I'm going to be coloring all of my images today with my Copic markers. Here, I had a little fuzzy on that one, like the little decor piece. And then I further had to stamp out a couple of other items. So we'll just go through, we'll do some coloring and then talk about the ways that we can add snows to our card. All of these ways aren't going to be for everybody, and that's fine. I used all of them on one card, but I don't always do that. You can certainly pick and choose which ones will suit your card best. And maybe you want to use 1, maybe you want to use 3, like just, whatever it is that you're into. So heading into the coloring, I chose to do my lantern black just as a good neutral. You could obviously do this any color that you would like. But I knew that I was going to be sticking to a pretty traditional like red and green Christmas combination, and I wanted the snow to show up as white. So in order to have good contrast and a neutral, black seemed like the best option. I'm going in first, and this is actually my lightest color for the black. This is a C5. It's like a mid gray, cool gray. And what I'm doing is I'm putting in my shadows. So I used to do this all the time where I would go in with my lightest color and lay down my shadows, and then I would color lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. And sometimes when I am coloring an image for the first time, I still do that just so I can see where I want to lay everything down. So even though I drew this image, this is legitimately the first time that I'm coloring it with markers. I usually, when I'm illustrating my sets, I will color them digitally just so, well, honestly, so I can see them all colored and pretty and beautiful. But also so that when I'm sending them to like Melissa or Lisa at Honeybee, they can kind of see the thought to like for them to come together. And so I have colored this one digitally, but not by hand, not with my Copics. So now that I have all of the shadows laid out and I am happy with where those are, I'm going to go in with my black. And I know that this is a little bit scary, but if you want an object to look black, you have to use black. Just like if you want an object to look white, you have to leave some white. So what I'm doing here is I'm going in, and you'll see that some of the areas, where I originally thought I would add my darkest color, I don't, which is why going in with your lightest color is so incredibly helpful, because if I had just gone in with my darkest color, then those areas would be black and it would be really, really hard to pull it up. So let's talk about why I put my shading where I put it. On the top portion, like the it's not even a lid because it's all one piece. The roof, that's a better word. The roof of the lantern, like I only added the black to one side because I don't want them to end up looking like one piece. For the bottom with the like the columns of the lantern, I chose to add my shading to the outside because I'm going to have candles inside. So if the candles are my light source, then, and I didn't do any like yellow glow or anything like that, but that would be super cool. I have so many ideas for this lantern. But then, you would have that light there. For any of there's two columns that are actually drawn so that you can see both sides of it because of the perspective that the lantern's drawn in. Just pick one or the other to add your darkest shading to. So on this one up front, I added my shading to the right so that it would be the darkest on the side. For the one in the back, where you can see both of the columns, I added, like where you can see the corners, I guess is a better way to put it. I added the shading to the back, not the one that is on the side. And then I'm just going to go in from the black, like now we're on to the C9. I know on camera it all looks black. I know that. But in real life, it does not. In real life, you can see the gradual progression of it getting darker, or vice versa, it getting lighter on the edges. And I think maybe in the pictures you can see it as well. But I know on camera it just looks like, Kelly, you're just coloring black on black on black. But I'm not. I promise. So for my lightest color, you can see that the areas that I'm coloring, I'm leaving just like the tiniest little sliver of white to be my highlight, which will be my C5. And for the ones that I chose to make darkest, like the columns I chose to make darkest, I'm not leaving that highlight at all. I'm just filling it in with the C7. I did show you the full coloring of the lantern, even though by the time we're done adding our snow, you're not going to be able to see this floor at all. But I did want you to just have an example that was out there in case you're not adding the snow and you're trying to figure out how you want to color the lantern. I just wanted to include the whole thing. And again, obviously you can, swap out for whatever colors, but it would give you an idea of where to kind of lay down your shadows. So here you can see... I'm really, really trying to stretch this marker. I should have stopped and refilled it. I didn't. But don't do what I'm doing. Do stop and refill your marker because you don't want to ruin your nibs, and your coloring will be better with a well-inked marker. I just was, honestly, I was being lazy. Probably because I was coloring so many images, but that's no excuse. That's just me being honest. So I'm going to go in with my lightest color and blend that out. And then you'll be able to see the highlights. Same thing with the edges where we left those whites. You'll be able to see those little bit of highlights. The reason why the highlights are so important on the edges is because when you're coloring with a dark color, like we're coloring black here, it really helps so that the items don't just look flat. Because if you don't have that highlight on the edge, there is no separation. And we need that separation for it to be clear that we're coloring this as a 3-dimensional object. So that is the lantern in its entirety. I am going to then move on to the little decor piece. Now, this decor piece is built out, so it has everything. It has the bow, the holly, the pine, the bells. So you can just stamp this, color this, and die cut this and use it, which is exactly what I'm going to do today. But all of these elements are also included separately so that you can build your own centerpieces and your own decorations, however you would like to do that. So I opted to color my bow white, and I did that with just some warm grays. I wanted that to contrast the cool grays that we used for the black. Now, I used red candles in my card. I apologize. I only filmed coloring them in white. I didn't realize that I didn't film them in red. All of the shadows and everything will be the same. That hasn't changed. It's just instead of them being white, they will be red. So I do add some shadows kind of where the wick has burned down the candle in the center. This candle in the actual center, the tallest one, will have a lot of shadows at the bottom because it has 2 candles in front of it. And then I also add some shadows underneath the wax that's kind of like dripping down the side. That would have a little bit of shadow as well. And then because I am coloring these white, I'm just adding in the shadow portion. You would do the same thing with whatever color you chose. You would just then, when we get to the third color, which is a W1, you would then go back in with your lightest color and fill in everything else. But so I'm just going in with the W3 here and blending those out. Again, just adding kind of shadows to the left and right hand side, and then of the two that are in front and shadows in the back. This is going to give us that separation that I was talking about so that they look more dimensional. And then here, my lightest color is in fact my white cardstock. So after you do this portion is when you would go in with your lightest color and just fill in everything else. So for my little flames, I chose to do like a golden yellow combination. I apologize that because I was creating multiple cards, it's kind of like the footage was a little bit... Sometimes when I showed the colors, I had to cut it out because that part isn't in this card. So I will tell you that I used from lightest to darkest, a Y02, a Y08, a YR24, and an E99. That's kind of like my go-to golden yellow, which is also what I'm going to color these cute little bells. I think I know, I think it's like tooting your own horn when you say like they're so adorable, but when you're the person who drew them. But like truly, I think that they are super festive and totally adorable. I love the little bells. And I'm so glad that we were able to include them as a separate piece because you can, use them as a different way to decorate different things. It doesn't just have to be the lantern. So, and I think the stars are super cute. So anyway, I'm adding shading underneath like the section where the bells meet. I'm also adding shading where the ribbon is laying over the bells, but I am leaving a center-ish highlight. It's more to the left on the bell on the left, and it's more to the right on the bell on the right. So I did leave a portion of that just bright white so that they would look shiny. If you are heavy-handed and you go over that with your lightest yellow color, like no fear, you can just go back in and add that highlight with a white gel pen. To make my bells look as if they are actually cut out, I colored in the cutout portion with a W5 and then went over it with an E99. This is going to desaturate and darken up that color so that it looks like it's a much darker brown inside there than it really is. For the berries, we are going to use my go-to red combination. This is the same combination that I used for the candles that you did not watch me color. And this is an R32, an R35, an R29, and an R59. And so that is what I used for the little berries. And then to make sure that there is a difference between the holly and the pine, I used two different green combinations. The holly I chose to make yellow-green, which is a YG03, YG17, YG67, and I always link them below. So if you have any questions, I always link them in the description below. And then, so I just kind of went down the lines of the holly with my darkest color, and now I'm blending those out, just leaving some small sections to highlight around the edges, as well as kind of like the pieces that are wider. I hope that makes sense. Like, not the pieces, the portion of the holly that's indented, but the portion that's a little bit wider. I tried to make lighter. And then for the pine, here's the thing with the pine, okay? If you are not using the die cut, you can make the pine whatever size you want. You can make them much larger. If you are using the die cut, you do kind of want to keep your flicking to the shape of the pine that's drawn, because otherwise your die cut isn't going to match up. And pine is not solid. Like, when you look at it, you can see the light through the pine needles because they aren't so compact that the entire branch is solid for the most part. There's some short firs that maybe that's not the case. But these ones are drawn to be a little bit looser. So using the flicking method to add your color is a really great way to make sure that you maintain some of the lightness. And for this, that was a G29 and a G17. And then I just filled in the little branch part with a E. So, no. Yeah, it's an E79. So I did all of my die cutting. The lantern does have a die cut for the inside as well as the outside, which I love. And now here this isn't even the sentiment I use. It's so strange. Like, it is so bizarre to me. I don't create multiples at one time and then split them into 2 videos. Usually I create multiples at one time and then they all go into the same video. But this one was just too involved. Like, you can see, this is the only card that we're making, and this video is still like 25 odd minutes long. So in order to like try to fit everything in for all of the cards, it is a little choppy, and I apologize. So what I've done is I've stamped the sentiment in the Brilliant Gold pigment ink, and then I heat set that with gold embossing powder, and I ended up not doing it in white. I ended up doing it on black, and I liked that much better, and then I cut it out with this coordinating die cut. Here is the first way that we are going to add snow. You might think that I'm out of my mind. I am a little bit, but I think it's worth it. So I used just a paper pouncer and some Versamark ink and pounced on some ink. For the candles, I'm not going to add snow. What I'm adding here is clear sparkle embossing powder. So it's just going to make the bottom of the candles glittery. So this is not a snow aspect unless you wanted glittery snow on like white cardstock, then you absolutely could use the clear glitter embossing powder. This was just to add, a little bit of fun and festiveness, because to me, that Christmas cards should have all the glitters. So now here, I'm going to go in. This is white puff embossing powder. You've seen me use this before. This is the first way that we're going to add snow. So you might notice that we've gotten it everywhere. That's totally fine, because until you heat set it, it doesn't matter where it is. So I'm going to go in. I'm just using a dry paintbrush, and basically I'm cleaning up the front of the lantern and like any place that's not the floor of the lantern. I thought that it would be cute to have like little puffy snows that the little candles were sitting on inside the lantern. But honestly, like at the end of it, you can't really see a ton of it. I did use this quite a bit to add snow. So I don't necessarily know that I would use the white puff embossing powder again, and I have multiple times previously, and I'm sure I will use it more in the future. But would I have done the floor? Not 100% sure. It's not a bad look. I don't know that it really added so much to it. And then for the top, for the roof, I am going to kind of gather it around the edges with my dry paintbrush. This one, I don't care if it's a super clean look, because, you might have some snow that's kind of like sprinkled down or whatever. I'm also going to add some to the very top of the handle for the lantern. So I'm just going to clean up the inside edge. And then I will, once I'm happy with the way that it looks, I will go ahead and heat set this. This particular type of embossing powder, there's a couple of them. WOW has one. I'm using the Hero Arts one. I've used them both. They both work fine. But it gets bigger. It puffs up when you heat it. So I also wanted to add a little bit of glitters into my snow. So while my embossing powder was still hot, I went back in with that clear sparkle embossing powder and sprinkled that right on top, and then heat set it again. This isn't going to affect the puff portion any, but it just adds a little bit of glitter to that snow. Another way you could do that is to just put like stickles, or you could use the Rock Candy Distress ink and like a Distress medium or something to get it to stick. But I was just using embossing powder, mostly because embossing powder is pretty much... embossing powder is like instant. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to wait for it to dry like you do with pastes and stuff. So that's why it's kind of my go-to. So then once that was all heat set, now I did, because it took me so long, it took me forever. I did have to go in and re-ink the decor piece with the Versamark. And then here I'm doing the same thing. I don't want to completely cover up that coloring that we did. I just want to give like a little sprinkling of snow. Nothing that's gonna, like I said, cover up that beautiful coloring that we did, but it's just going to make it more festive, I guess. I don't know. I think I like the snow. For the bells, I just added it just to the portion like where the bells meet, like where it would I had this trouble the last time I did this video and I didn't know what they were called. Where the two parts where the bells meet. It's like a little lip where the bells meet is where I left the snow, because that's, if snow was falling on the bells, that's where it would catch. And then I heat set this as well. So I messed around quite a bit with what kind of background I wanted to do. This is the Snowy Pines 3D embossing folder. I really, really like it. And I tried it a couple of different ways with like different colors, but ultimately I settled on the green. The yellow green was a bit bright. I thought that I liked it in the beginning, but it's a bit bright. So I am going to go in with my blending brush, and this is Rustic Wilderness, and I'm just going to add some ink over top. This will ink differently than just, plain flat cardstock. You'll have areas that pick up more ink because they're raised, and I really like that. The second way that we're going to add snow is with this brayer. So this is the Brilliant White Pigment ink from Honeybee. I'm just inking that up on my brayer, and then I'm going right over top of these little Snowy Pines embossings, which is like pine cones and pine. It's really, really pretty. And I'm just going to add my white pigment ink over top of it. It will, you'll always be able to see it. It's not going to be like completely opaque. It will take on a little bit of the color behind it, but it's a fun way to add snow to like your backgrounds. Third way to add snow is the easiest, and that's just to freehand yourself a little snowbank. You could draw it with a pencil, but I didn't think that it was necessary. I just cut it out, just a swoop up and a swoop down. And then I'm going to use that as my little snowbank for my lantern to sit on. And I'll just trim off my excess. And then, so we've got the brayer, add it with the pigment ink, the embossing. I suppose the sparkle is, no, I wouldn't, you could add snow. That would technically, I guess, add some texture and stuff to your snow. I could have done it on the little snowbank that I did. That would have been cute. I could have added the puff to that as well. But anywho, so now I'm getting ready to start assembling. And so I'm putting this down. I don't love a white outline on my die cuts. That's not a secret if you watch my channel. And so I'm going to go in with a green that matches the background fairly well. Now you may be asking yourself, Kelly, how are you getting around that embossing powder? Your alcohol markers will color your embossing powder, so you do have to be a little bit careful. I just went around the edges, and if there was a lot of embossing powder, I just skimmed kind of the side of it. If it was open, then I did, just color it in. And it's going to be the same thing with the candles. I did have to hold these in place for a minute because I'm gluing them on top of embossing powder. But once the glue was dry, it had no issue holding. And again, I colored those in as well. I opted to pop up these, the little decor piece on top of the lantern, with some little pop dots, and I just trimmed them down to fit however I needed. And then this, that's really the only kind of popped up element. Everything else is glued down pretty flat, but I wanted it to sit on top of the lantern. I think that this is super, super cute. And there's other elements that you could use, not even included in the set, to decorate your lantern for maybe a different thing. And then, of course, I colored in my white outline for my die cuts because I just don't like it. I like how it blends when they're colored in. I love the dyes. That's not like, die cutting out the image, because fussy cutting is for the birds. So here I'm going in, I'm adding just some highlights to the bells, to the berries, things like that. You absolutely could use your white gel pen to add like a small amount of snow. I wouldn't recommend coloring in a large area, but you certainly could use it to, add in a little bit of snow. And then the last way that, oh, this is me putting on the sentiment. Doesn't the black look so much better? So the last way that we are going to add the snow is actually going to be to spatter it. And that's why I had to wait until the end when everything was put together. I am covering up my sentiment, but this is just a little bit of white acrylic paint. And I'm going to just add just a little bit of water to get it a good consistency. I'm going to spatter it off the card first, because the majority of the paint comes off right in the beginning, and then it gives these really fine spatters. And this will be more opaque because it is paint. Alternatively, you could also use like the distress stain spray in picket fence. That would work as well. Or I know like Copic has a opaque white. You could use a spatter. So I hope this gives you some ideas for how to add snow to your cards. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.